I have been tired before, but not like this. Not the tiredness that sleep cures. The other kind. The kind that settles into the chest and stays there, quiet as a stone. And you carry it to breakfast and carry it to the dispatch box and carry it back again to an empty room. I do not speak of this. One does not. There is a version of me that people seem to require. I have obliged them. The voice, the jaw, the hat pulled down at a certain angle, the cigar held just so. I perfected the performance long before they began to watch, and by the time they were watching, I had almost forgotten which parts were performance and which parts were simply Winston. That is the trouble with armor. You wear it long enough and you cannot remember what the skin feels like underneath. My father never believed I would amount to anything particular. He said it plainly. Not cruelly, I do not think, simply plainly. And in the way of fathers, whose plainness leaves a bruise that does not show. I spent a considerable portion of my life attempting to reply to him. He died before I could. He died when I was still only a rumor of a man, unformed, loud, embarrassingly eager. I wonder, sometimes late, I wonder what he would have made of all this, whether it would have been enough. I suspect I would have found a reason to believe it was not. The war years. People want to speak of those as though I was granite throughout. I was not granite. There were mornings. I will say it once, and no more. There were mornings when I lay in bed and did not wish to rise. The dog, I call it. My black dog. It comes without announcement. It sits at the foot of the bed and stares. And a man who has just told a nation it will never surrender must then negotiate with a dog in the privacy of his own mind before he can put on his trousers. I find that funny, rather. I hope you do as well. The painting helped. People imagine it as a hobby, a quaint pastime for a statesman, brushes and countryside. Rather sweet. It was not sweet. It was survival of a particular kind. When I stood before a canvas, I was not the Prime Minister. I was not the bricklayer I sometimes became at Chartwell, which surprised people. I was simply a man in front of a problem he could not solve with language. Language was everything to me. Language was my great instrument and my great vanity. But a canvas does not respond to words. You cannot argue the light into being. You cannot orate the color into the right place. You must simply look and feel and act, and accept what comes. I wish I had been better at that. Accepting what comes. I was not often. I pushed. I maneuvered. I was not always right. Gallipoli. That weight does not leave a man. The men who did not come back from that shore, I carry them still. In a room inside myself I do not often open. Decisions made in the dim blur of strategy, maps and projections and confidence, and then the reality. The reality is always so much more specific than the strategy. The reality has faces. There is something I have told almost no one. In the very worst of it, the summer before America came in, I was not certain, not privately. Publicly I was iron. And I believed in iron because iron was required, and because if the man at the front does not believe, no one below him will. But alone, at 3 a.m, with the weight of an island on a desk covered in telegrams, I prayed. I, who have not been a man of conspicuous faith, prayed in the plain and desperate way of a man with no remaining options. I do not know to what. I do not know if anything answered. But the morning came. The morning always came. I have lived too long and not long enough. I have loved England with a ferocity that sometimes embarrassed even me. That large, inconvenient feeling I could never reduce to something manageable. I have made it ridiculous at times, I know. I have made it magnificent, I'm told. I'm not sure in the end which mattered more. I am not sure the end is the right place from which to measure anything at all. What we have just heard is only the surface of a man who spent his entire life constructing surfaces. The voice in that letter is real, but it is also still a performance. Churchill could not entirely stop performing, even in solitude. That was not a flaw. It was perhaps his most defining characteristic. That even the private Winston was shaped by the public one, until the two became inseparable, and the man himself may never have known quite where the border was. What remains when you look closer is something stranger and more human than the statues suggest. There is a quality that very few public figures possess, and almost none can sustain: the ability to make an entire nation feel that its survival is a personal matter between the leader and history itself. Churchill had this quality. He did not manufacture it. It came from something genuinely unresolved inside him, a lifelong argument with inadequacy that he never quite won and never quite lost. He was a man shaped by absence. His father's emotional distance left a wound that money and fame and power could not close, and Churchill spent decades attempting to fill it with achievement, which is one of the most productive responses to grief that a person can have, and also one of the loneliest. The hunger that drove him was not simple ambition. It was more complicated than that. It was the hunger of a man trying to prove something to someone who was no longer there to receive the proof. His contradictions were enormous. He was a man of profound sentiment who could issue orders of extraordinary coldness. He wept at music, at certain passages of literature, at the sight of soldiers marching. He also made decisions during the war that cost thousands of lives, and he absorbed that cost in the only way available to him: by continuing. By not looking directly at certain things. Whether that was strength or a form of necessary blindness is a question that doesn't resolve cleanly, and he would not have expected it to. He was also for long stretches wrong. He was wrong about India. He was wrong about the gold standard. He misjudged situations with the same confidence he correctly judged others. What distinguished him was not infallibility. He was magnificently fallible, but his capacity to reconstitute himself after failure and continue insisting on his own relevance. Some call this arrogance. It was also in 1940 the only thing standing between a negotiated peace and everything that followed. The depression he called his black dog was not incidental to who he was, and it was structural. The same emotional depth that made him capable of genuine despair made him capable of genuine conviction. Men of shallow feeling do not move nations. They manage them. Churchill moved people because he himself was moved. By history, by the idea of England, by the romance of struggle. And that movement was real, even when the romance around it was partly invented. What people respond to even now is not the speeches alone. It is the sense behind the speeches of a man who had genuinely looked at darkness and decided, on no guaranteed grounds, to oppose it. That decision was not made once. It was made repeatedly, in private, before anyone was watching. On mornings when the black dog was sitting at the foot of the bed, and the telegrams were piling up, and the news from the coast was not good, he chose, again and again, to believe the morning would come. It did. And it didn't save him from everything, but it saved for a time quite a great deal else. That tension between the man who doubted and the voice that never showed it is what makes him worth returning to. Not the statues, not the quotations on motivational posters. The gap between what he felt and what he said. That gap is where the real person lived. And he lived there, quietly, for 90 years.